Even Par obviously launching today. What do you want to see happen at a local level, and what are the steps that are going to be made at a local level to grow the game for women and girls?
No, I think the first step is that we don't want clubs to be scared. I think, the opportunity is around, if we do embrace this, what can we gain? I love the point that was made earlier that, if we don't act, what do we potentially lose? But if we do choose to take a step forward, then, there's so much opportunity for us. So what I just really want to see initially is just, I guess a first step forward, that club committees put their hand up to say that we want to be a leader and we want to explore this space. We want to learn. We want to go on the journey. We're not asking for, them to create seismic shifts in how they operate their golf clubs, but we do want to see, I'd love to see a commitment from clubs to say we want to tackle gender inequality in our golf club, however it might be positioned, and start to explore what we can do within our local community to create change moving forward. That's the short term. The long term option is to create, golf clubs where there is no barrier to participation for anyone, and not just around gender and agenda, but also around our multicultural communities, our asylum seekers, our refugees, our, people living with disabilities, LGBTQI communities. We open doors for everyone in golf, and that long term golf will forever reflect everyone in the community, not just a small proportion of the community that it currently does.
Have you found the golf clubs have been pretty welcoming in terms of the message you guys are trying to push?
Yeah, look, I think I started out on the Vision 2025 roadshow. We're doing 50 presentations around the country this year between January and August. For the most part, what I'm finding is that people are curious about this piece of work, and there's a lot of women. It's interesting. I was just saying to Bridie that often when I do these presentations and I start to talk about the relationship between gender inequality, violence against women, the health and wellbeing of the community, doors that are closed for women and girls, what I see are a lot of women sort of rolling their eyes and going, yep, I get this. And they haven't had a voice, they haven't been able to speak it. And I see this wherever I go, that women are like, I can see you're speaking for me, but I can't speak for myself. So there's been incredible support from the women in the community, but also some really wonderful and terrific men. And I think the fact that already we've got 30 clubs that have put their hand up around Geelong and metropolitan Melbourne that said we want to be a part of this, I think's fantastic, and that shows a genuine appetite in the Victorian community to create change for women in golf.
And I guess events like this sort of highlight the equality and inclusiveness that golf can have. If it's going to happen at the elite level, then there's no reason why it can't happen at a local level as well.
Absolutely, and I'm a firm believer in all of my experiences in sport and otherwise. Attitude reflects leadership, and if the leaders don't set the cultural parameters, then the rest of the sport will not follow suit. So I think it's really terrific that Golf Australia will set and role model the standards and expectations we want to see in the sport, and the Vic Open is a terrific example of us choosing, and leadership is a choice, us choosing to walk that talk. And so I'm really proud to be involved in an organisation that chooses to lead for women and girls and everyone in the community.
Golf, it has been seen in the past as a bit of an elitist sport. It's not, had a history of being cheap and accessible for everybody. Is that, I guess, one of the key things as well, making it accessible for women and girls, but also people from that demographic that perhaps haven't had access to golf in the past?
Yeah, for sure. And something that I certainly talk about, my own background is my dad's a Turkish immigrant. They came here they were only allowed to bring $20 when they came here in 1969. So they started from nothing. My mum's a daughter of a Hungarian refugee. I took my dad onto a golf course for the first time on Boxing Day this year at Meetung to play golf. I'm the first person in my whole family to walk onto a golf club, and that was I went to a golf course in 2002. So we were a really working class family, and so golf was completely inaccessible, not just financially, but socially and culturally. But I'm a potential member. I'm a potential golf participant and player. Yet golf was, in so many ways, there were too many barriers for me growing up to get involved in the game. So I think we need to be really mindful of the financial barriers. And we live in a time where the cost of living is escalated compared to what it was, say, 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. We need to think of new and different ways to make the game financially accessible. And women are telling us one of the biggest barriers to their engagement in the game is affordability, to not just getting on the course and buying clubs, but also to affordable coaching. There's some really great research globally around this issue, and it's not just an Australian thing, but this is a global issue, yeah. I think, Bridie, your office looking at different ways of accessibility for all sports is a really important factor.
Chyloe talked about voice, and that's the thing that we're not doing enough, is asking people who don't play golf, why not? And speaking around times of teeing off, if women are allowed to play golf at certain days, at certain times, but it's 8:30, what if you're a mum dropping your kids at school, or you've got a part-time job and you don't have 6 hours to devote and then have a glass of Chardonnay at the end of the game? So I think changing the offering and asking people, what would it take for you to join? What if we made it free? What if we made you be able to come anytime? If you could connect with 6 friends on a WhatsApp group and come in at 11 and play for 3 hours, then you enjoy the aspects of golf. And I've got friends who go to Royal Park, and they're not members, so they just pay a fee and they play for a few hours and they have a beer at the end and they have a great time. But again, you have to know someone who's doing that, and until you do, you feel out of the loop.
You're a really passionate, emotive speaker, and in the launch you mentioned a battle cry around change our game. What does that actually mean to you?
I think experiencing firsthand the disparity between what a sport looks like for your male peers and what you're experiencing is quite confronting. And I was a med student and then a doctor where around 50% of med student cohort is women and 50% are men. And yet then as you progress through your career, and I wanted to do surgery when I was a junior doctor, there were no women orthopaedic surgeons in Queensland. So there's this sort of opportunity where they say, no, we're okay for women to be surgeons, but you've got to be like everybody here. You've got to accept the type of offerings or the system. And so that's what we're seeing too often is we're okay with women doing all sorts of things, but what we're seeing is actually just a lack of diversity, that all the women and the men that are partners in law firms are kind of the same. And all the women and the men that are surgeons are prepared to accept no sleep, terrible lifestyle, a couple of divorces and kids that don't see you ever. So we don't want everything to be the same and everyone to be the same type of person. And so allowing people to access sport and recreation and to be themselves, whatever that looks like, whether that's about physical changes, and something we've seen with AFLW is that women of all shapes, sizes and fitnesses are showing up and going, hi, I'm Sarah Perkins. I know I'm unfit and overweight, but I'm also really passionate about footy and I want to play and I'm going to get in shape. But she doesn't look the same as Erin Phillips, and yet she's equally committed. And we haven't seen that enough in sport for both men and women. We haven't seen it enough in administration and business. We've seen men be coaches and umpires and referees in a certain way. And yet what we're seeing now with the evolution of men's AFL coaching is guys like Damien Hardwick and Luke Beveridge are a different type of coach. They're inclusive, they talk about mental health, they talk about fears, aspirations, and yet Mick Malthouse wasn't that type of coach. So I think we're becoming much more excited about the idea of people delivering their skill or their leadership potential in whatever way is authentic to them. And that word can be overused, but I actually think that being the kind of player or the kind of administrator or the kind of coach that you really are is what galvanises the people you look after. And that's what change our game means. Let's think about it differently. Let's be inclusive. Let's allow all types of personalities and ambitions and ways of communicating and ways of looking into all forms of sport and recreation.
Bridie, just on that, does that mean, in terms of changing the game, does it also mean different kinds of golf? I know we were talking in the media table before about the blitz golf format at our Kurdas just recently.
When you're not in a sport, you can afford to be more innovative. So you ask why, and I'm a doctor, I ask why about everything. And when I was hearing people say this is how ladies' committees work or ladies' days work, and I said, oh, why is that? And they go, well, because. So that's the answer we hear too often is we've been doing it this way for 123 years, or we've been doing it, this is how it works. And you think, well, why wouldn't you change it? And why wouldn't you offer things to say and do a general survey? If we gave you the golf, if we gave you the clubs, if we gave you someone to show you how to do it, would you come down and spend 2 hours at a golf club? And then they're a potential member, they're a potential investor in the sport, and they might bring their kids in, they might bring the people around them, their parent, etc. So I think that it's a human nature to resist change. We hold on very tightly to the stuff that we think it's working, and we don't often ask, could we be doing this better? I mean, we don't do that generally about our health, about our relationships, about our jobs. Am I happy in this job? Do I want to be married to this person? That could be very dangerous, obviously, to keep asking yourself that question. And yet, mindful checking in about the way we do things is actually what we want to encourage all people to do. So I'm a big fan of people modifying sports to modify offerings. Professional golfers might not want to play differently. And we've seen some novelty formats of tennis, some novelty formats of AFL. The true believers of AFL aren't that crazy about AFLX, but they're trying it. And props to them. They're probably trying to make money, trying to sell something, trying to engage people early on in the season. I think we got AFLW for that. So I'm not necessarily an AFLX fan, but, bless the AFL for trying something new.
I think it's a really interesting conversation to have. And when we look at women's participation in golf at clubland, in 1970, 34% of female participants in golf clubs were female. Now we say 20%, but we're being a little bit generous with it. We're probably rounding up a touch. I think in the UK, in parts of the UK, that's 13%. When we go back to 1970, the role of women in society back then compared to what the role of women is now was completely different. We've had so much change in our gender role expectations in that 40 years, 45 years, yet the way we deliver golf is exactly how we've delivered golf back in 1970. 18-hole, Saturday competition, women played midweek. Yes, we've opened up most courses open up on a Saturday now for women, but, we still have our ladies, we're still calling them ladies. We still have ladies committees. And then we ask, but how come female participation has gone down? Well, the game hasn't evolved to suit the needs of the population that we want to engage. We've got less time, we've got less money. It takes, there's a really interesting statistic actually, when you graduate from university, it now takes you, in Vic Health, some mega trend data, it now takes you 5 years on average to get long-term secure full-time employment. 5 years on average once you graduate from university. That means you're 27 before you start earning an income. And you want to buy a house, you need 20% deposit plus stamp duty on a $500,000 property. That's $125,000 you need to buy your own place. And you start that journey when you are 27. Now, if I've got 2 or 3 or 4 grand, I'm not putting that into a golf club membership. I'm putting that into my mortgage. And by that point, I'm probably maybe getting married, and I may be trying to have children. Now, if I've got 3 grand, I'm not putting it into a golf club membership. So when am I going to start my golf journey? I'm going to wait till I retire. But we've got an issue with women's golf. The average age of a female golfer in this country, in clubland, is 8 years older than that of a man. It's mid-60s, it's 64. The average age of a male golfer is 56. Now, we have got a big issue in this country around how we offer up golf for women and girls.
Stand boomers.
Absolutely. But we need to change how we deliver golf so that it suits the needs of women and girls in the community, because we have changed so much, yet the game hasn't. Men, for the most part, their lives have remained, mostly the same, and we're seeing some really lovely shifts for men as well, some freeing of men from those gender role constraints. But the change in the game, change in our lifestyles has been massive, yet the game hasn't changed. And if we're going to fix things and change things for the future so that the sport for women thrives, we've got to really shift and really rethink and modernise how we do golf, yeah.
So just on that, would the long-term goal be, and this is clearly a long-term goal because this might take a long time to get there, but instead of having it here at 30 P's, instead of having the men and women playing separate tournaments, one after the other, but against each other head to head? I
don't think we need to go and do that. I don't think the women want it. I mean, I think we love the fact that you play in these competitions that are female events, female competitions. But the experience, how we deliver golf, where it is co-ed and it's intermingled, and we get the opportunity to celebrate everyone. How beautiful that is, and the men love looking down the range and saying, "Oh, geez, there's Panilla, or there's Minjee," or what a great thrill for them. That men get excited by playing amongst some of the best women in the world. How great! So I don't think we need to create these kind of, where men and women compete against each other. But I think what's important is we share the space and we role model that men and women can share spaces and celebrate each other. I think this notion of putting it just perpetuates more of that battle of the sexes kind of mentality, which is not very helpful and not very constructive.
I also think it trivialises the performance and aspirations of women, so it becomes a novelty then, and it's been talked about in other sports, particularly endurance sports, where we've had women finish top 10 in Hawaii overall, for example, or Marianne Vos, arguably the best cyclist of our generation. People saying, I wonder how she'd go if she raced men. You think, well,
she's... People talk about Serena Williams a lot.
Yeah, and that's, again, these are physiological questions that are interesting, but she's trying to be the best, and has been the best tennis player in the world, in her gender. in her level of competition. We're not racing Usain Bolt against a horse.
Yeah.
And when we do that, it's a novelty. Or when Michael Phelps swam against a shark. Apparently that wasn't even a real shark. I was gutted to discover that. But again, that's a novelty that you get paid to do as part of a stunt. And women want to be competing against a level playing field, which is other women who are professional. They've paid the licence, they're committing the training. And so I think we need to be respectful of that. Yeah.
So what's the next? I mean, obviously this is an exemplar, really. This tournament. What's the next one you think? What's the next one in Australia or maybe in Victoria that you can target?
Well, what I liked about what Stacey Peters said earlier is a big part of this is actually just keeping going. You know, persistence, endurance in all forms of change is actually about don't give up when it doesn't work. When you have equal prize money, and there was some commentary about a month ago coming out of the US of why aren't enough women in the top 50 coming to this particular tournament. You think, well, there's all sorts of reasons. You need to not do it just one time. You need to persist and say we are committing to this for 10 years, and then the athletes will make the effort to change their schedule to ensure that their sponsors support them to come out to Australia. We're a long way away. We think we're really important, but if you live in Japan or in Belgium or the US, it's a bit of an effort to come here. So it has to be worth the while of the athletes, and I think persisting and showing the data over time, showing the increase in the number of top 50 women that are coming, the level of the playing field, how the men and the women are interacting and the value that that brings to the community then becomes a gold standard. And then other tournaments will say, oh, we want a bit of that. We want to be like that. So again, not making it a stunt or a one-off, persisting and saying we're continuing the commit, particularly to coverage and broadcast. That's a huge thing because then that brings it to the living rooms or the office spaces or the phones of people who want to consume golf and passionate about it.
And I guess on that point too, that yes, it's great that we've got this, and you know, that the world will look down at us and go, oh wow, they're doing some great stuff down there in Australia, but we don't want to be looked at because we do one tournament that treats women and men equally. Like in the whole world, our sport does one event that treats men and women equally, and we're patting ourselves on the back. Yes, we've taken a step, which is great. We have to do that. We've taken the first step. But from our perspective at Golf Australia, we want this to be the norm. We want this to be the template of how you run, you know, an event. And so, you know, there's absolutely a commitment from us to look at our other state-based events. Can we deliver this all over the country for all of our state-based events? Can we then lobby for change internationally? So can we work with the PGA of Australia? Can we work with the LPGA? You know, how do we work with international governing bodies so that we can get more of this more often? But, you know, we're not there yet if we've got one event in the whole world where there's gender equality, pay parity. We're so not even there yet. And if you looked at, you know, most industries, they're way closer to pay parity than we are. So yes, it's great, it's fantastic, but it's just a start, and let's be real about it. It's one event in the whole world that does this. Let's make it the norm, and it certainly from a Golf Australia perspective, it is going to be the template moving forward. Yeah.